The holiday season is ending, and it means it's time for another Great Outdoors Garage. And what we're going to talk about today is tools we love to hate. Now, I'm going to address some viewer comments in this video because I really appreciated some of the viewer comments I got. They were great, and I really want more viewer comments because they can lead you in a new direction, and we all can learn together. And that's the big thing there, is that we can all learn a lot. So in a previous video, we talked about essential tools, and one of the tools we mentioned was the hammer. And I mentioned that the hammer can get you in a lot of trouble. And I really appreciated, I had one commenter say that the hammer had gotten her in a lot of trouble on a few occasions. And it's one of these tools that you can use. It's readily available. It's on the shelf. You go to the store and get it, and you don't really realize necessarily how you should be using it. It seems incredibly obvious. You pick it up and hit stuff with it. But maybe you're hitting something you shouldn't be hitting. You want to hear my full comments about that, you should go and view my essential tools video. Now, another thing was mentioned is, what about vice grips? And that's a really good question. What about vice grips? Vice grips are an essential tool. Now, here's the thing. Vice grips, though, they're not for taking loose bolts that are in good condition. They're for taking loose bolts that are in bad condition. Like if I look at this bolt here, it's still got a nice discernible hex head on it. Now, when these start to strip out, these vice grips are useful because I can use these little claws in here and I can grab onto anything that might still be sticking out on that bolt. I have even used the technique in the past where I'll actually tighten a set of vice grips down and kind of work them a little bit back and forth on the bolt as I tighten them down, and then tighten them down really tight. And I've gotten strip bolts out like that in the past. Luckily enough, I haven't had to do that in a long time, but these vice grips are extremely useful. Another great use for them is you can tighten them down really tight like this and grab onto a piece of metal, and they'll just hold it as if they were a vise. And that can also be extremely useful. So these vice grips are a tool that are useful, but I would say don't use these, like if you're using them to take out a bolt, don't intend on ever using that bolt again. So, you're getting to this point of taking a bolt out, be ready to replace the bolt. And if you put the bolt back in after you've used vice grips on it, I'm really just going to go ahead and not condone that at all. And they can be very useful in taking out a strip bolt. That's the major use I like these for. You can use them to take loose bolts as long as they're not tight. If the bolt isn't too tight, you can use a pair of vice grips to take it loose. And sometimes you'll even run into stuff that's actually, and it's been a long time, but it seems like I've run into some stuff before that was basically intended to be taken loose with a vice grip. But these are handy. I've heard them called a third hand, and they really are, because you can lock these down, and you can see the little release lever here. Basically, you tighten this screw, and that's what controls how tight the jaws are, with these little screws down here. And then you can just go and push like that, and they'll release and kick out like that. So it's a nice kind of almost, well, it is a spring-loaded mechanism because there's the spring. Now, vice grips are one, the same person mentioned never buy cheap tools. And I agree with that and disagree with that. There are some tools you can get away with being cheap. These things, I've had the cheaper ones, and I've had a few of these cheaper ones actually split open down here around where the adjusting screw goes in. And I've had the adjusting dog. We remember the adjusting dog, right? I've had it where it'll slip off the screw and everything, and this whole area of the vice grip just kind of split open and spread out. So there are some of these that are definitely cheap and will not do what you need them to do. So that's a good point to make. And then there's also two different types of jaws on these. I have an antique pair of these somewhere, but the jaw is almost like perfectly straight. It's still got the little teeth in there, but it kind of just comes straight back and then straight back on this side. I find that these straighter ones and these curved ones like this both kind of have their uses. These are really great if you're on like a bigger bolt like this. It'll kind of curve around that bolt head and give you more surface area and grab. Whereas these may not do that, but these are kind of useful in other situations where if like I've got a smaller bolt or some kind of pin that's stuck in something, I can grab on and pull them out. And that's another really good point I come to is like sometimes you're not even trying to pull out a bolt with these. Sometimes you'll just have like a shaft. If I can find something sitting here on my shelf to give you an example, you'll just have like a shaft like this that's maybe pressed into something, and you'll need a way to grab onto it so that you can pull it out. And these can be very useful for that sometimes. Now, yet again, that's probably going to be like a dowel pin kind of situation where like an alignment pin basically. And so when you pull that out, you're going to damage that pin and need to get another one, but at least you got it out of there and then got whatever you needed to get in to replace it. You know, it gives you that access to pull that one pin out so you can put the other pin in. So that's important. I have to bring back up the 8-inch slip joint pliers because I kind of agree with the comment. A person said they hate these things. And I can agree with why. I like them, but I use them in a very specific way. These are usually used for picking up, like if I'm welding something, like if I welded that nut onto the end of that bolt for whatever reason, I can pick it up with these and move it out of my way while I work on something else. So these, for me, usually are used for picking up a hot item or taking something and bending it. I have seen people use these on bolt heads, and it's kind of like the vice grips. Please don't do that. Unless if you plan on just replacing that nut or bolt. It's just a really good way to damage the threads and make a real mess. Let's skip over these right now. I'm going to go to these. This is another tool people love to hate. And this is one that I'm going to actually come to the defense of. This is what us old people would call a monkey wrench. Nowadays it's called an adjustable wrench. My understanding is these were called a monkey wrench because the guy that actually made these, he had the nickname Monkey. And when he invented these, everybody around the shop wanted Monkey's wrench. Because here's the thing with these. These are both metric and standard and any size you've never seen before. Any 6-point type of fastener, like we always use, these will fit up on those. Now, space constraints are absolutely an issue. Sometimes you can't fit these up in there. But what's the real reason why people hate these is because they're a really good way to strip out a fastener. Now, I come to the defense because when they're used properly, they're a good wrench. I've heard people just come out and say, oh, you should never, ever use these ever at all. That's not true. There's a time and a place where these are correct. And I'm going to say when you're maintaining something is a really good time to have them. Meaning those fasteners come on and off commonly. They don't have time to seize up. They're not seized up, and you're assuming the other people around you are knowledgeable, and they're not over tightening them. And you can pop fasteners right loose with these real quick. Check your oil. Check whatever belt tension or whatever you need to do before you take whatever machine out to do its job. But there's a couple of key things about using these properly. And I will say I have used them improperly. But whenever you are taking something loose, you always want to be loosening in this direction, meaning this fixed jaw here is the one that's really taking the turning force, and this other jaw here is kind of just holding it. So, like if you think about it, this unscrews this way. So I turn the wrench this way to unscrew it. So I want my adjustable wrench on there like that, not like that. And that's one of the big downfalls of when people use adjustable wrenches. They'll put them on there like this. Now, I'm not going to blame those people because they were probably in a tight spot, and the only way they could get the wrench on there was like that. And yes, I have been in that situation before. But just know when you have to do that, your likelihood of stripping that nut out goes up like tenfold at least, probably even more than that. It just goes up a lot. So you want that fixed jaw to always be taking that major load of you turning across this way. So that's the major thing with these, is make sure where that fixed jaw is. The other complaint I have about these is whenever I'm working, and this is probably just how my brain works or doesn't work, if you want to say, this like thread always seems backwards to me, and I always end up loosening when I'm trying to tighten down. And that's the other thing too, when you use one of these wrenches, constantly be trying to tighten it down and make sure it stays up on that fastener as tight as you can get it. Until, I mean, if the fastener gets finger loose, where you can just turn it by your fingers, which this one you can't. But if you can just turn it real easy, don't worry about tightening it up a whole lot. So these have their use. They have their place. They're not a bad wrench. They're just a misunderstood wrench. Then we have these. These are one of my favorites ever. I wish I had a couple more examples of these. I don't right now. Some of these have the jaws that are designed like this one, where they're kind of shaped where they can get over a nut. Some of them have a much more straighter jaw design to them. These are what one would refer to as a gas pump plier. And basically, these are like a slip joint plier taken to the max. Meaning I can switch gears here almost, if you want to say, and open these up where they're way wide and get huge fasteners off. As long as they're not too tight. These are great as long as you're dealing with a fastener that's not too tight. Now, some of you out there are probably going to say another name for these. And I don't want to say that name because that is actually a company's name now. And so I don't want to step on anybody's toes and get in any trouble. I'm a small YouTube channel here. But there is a company that is commonly what we would refer to these back in the day. Now we just call them gas pump pliers is my name for them. And even that name is really outdated. But these are a good plier to have in your toolbox. But yet again, it's another one of those tools that you really have to use correctly and understand the use for. Now I'm going to go to a tool I hate. The big Phillipses. These things drive me crazy. And I'll tell you the reason why. The Phillips head was never designed to take the torque that one of these fasteners will take, especially under loosening. Oh yeah, they'll tighten down just fine. But they're basically a one-use fastener. And I wouldn't even call them a one-use fastener. I'd call them a half-use fastener because, yeah, you can get them in, but you can't ever get them back out. So this is an area where I would agree with my grandparents. These are just bad. They're just bad. Whenever you have to go and use one of these, it's just a pain. But something I'll point out that you see here, you might see this kind of scarred here on each side of this. This is from where I took vice grips and clamped it around the screwdriver to try and get more grip to actually take a fastener loose. And people might frown on that, and they should. because the fastener should have never been in there in the first place. There is what is called an impact screwdriver, and I know I have at least one of them around. I can't find it, which is miserable, but that's what happens when other people get in your tools. And I do have some other people that get in my tools around here, and then they just come up missing. So, but there is such a thing as an impact screwdriver, and it's not even like a hydraulic impact screwdriver, like what you would put on your air compressor. It is actually a mechanism. There's basically a screw mechanism inside the screwdriver, and I hope I can find one to show you someday. And what you do is you actually take our friend here, the hammer, and you rotate that screwdriver over, and there's a spiral inside of it, for lack of a better term. And when you hit that into that screwdriver, it drives the handle that you're holding with your hand down onto that spiral, and it pushes forward as it's turning. And that can cause the fastener to release. And that's your best bet. And whenever you run into one of these big Phillips, go and get you an impact screwdriver, because you're probably not ever getting it out any other way. And then when you get it out, replace the damn thing. Put an Allen key in there, put a Torx in there. I don't care what you put in there, any damn thing other than a Phillips. The Phillips was never designed to take that torque. And I really think this larger size of Phillips, I just call it a number 3, but this larger size of Phillips should have never been invented, in my opinion. And then something I'm going to come back to real quick from another YouTube comment, and I just have to talk about this because I love the comment so much, because there is a film out there called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And it is an excellent, excellent film. It's one of the best Westerns you'll ever see anywhere. And the comment was about me clicking these ratchets over. And I want to reiterate this because this, to me, when you come to your mechanic's toolbox, and this is what they'd call a mechanic's toolbox. Like when you go to the store, that's always what it's called. Oh, it's a mechanic's toolbox, 250-piece set. And, they tout it whatever way they want to tout it. But anyway, always test your ratchets. And the comment is you made me think of Tuco in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly when he is testing a revolver and he's making sure it clicks over right. And he's listening to the cylinder. He puts his ear up to the cylinder and listens to it as that ratchet assembly clicks over. And so I want to do this again. And see, even that ratchet wanted to hang up a little bit, even though this is a good ratchet. And so that when you go into a store to buy a ratchet, I'm telling you right now, don't touch them. If you can't click them over coming out of that store, don't touch them. I know I said that earlier in another video. I really think it's worth reiterating. Now, I talk about that and I say, well, to me, the ratchet is the most important single item in a mechanic's tool set. Now, a lot of people would disagree with me, and I'm curious to hear your comments on that. What's your favorite tool out of a mechanic's tool set? The other thing I will say, I have not mentioned the breakover bar, but I have to say, RIP breakover bar. Your days are not done, but you get very mild usage. Now here's the thing. I understand, and some of you might comment, that's a 3/8 inch, these are 1/2 inch, so these are heavier duty than that. But what we were taught always back in the day was never ever try to take a fastener loose that's tightened all the way down with a ratchet. You'll just ruin your ratchet and you'll wear it out. Always use the breakover bar first and then switch to the ratchet. Now, I've heard and read that a billion times, and it's true. But I think it's true for maybe however many years ago. I'm not going to comment on how many years ago because I don't know. Here's the thing, and I kind of alluded to it or maybe commented on my other video. I abuse these ratchets. I am a chronic ratchet abuser. I will take these and I'll put cheater bars. And then what a cheater bar is, if you don't know, it's any kind of good piece of pipe you can just slip over the end of the ratchet or even over a breaker bar just to make it longer and give you more leverage. I have cheater barred these ratchets so many times and they still just work. Most every ratchet I've dealt with is like that. I've never really broke the ratchet mechanism out of a ratchet that I can remember. Even crappy ratchets I haven't broke the ratchet mechanism out of. So for me, the breakover bar is kind of obsolete. You know, if you get something super, super tight and, you know, and then particularly too, like a really good option is your big breakover bar. Here's your 1/2-inch breakover bar, and you can see that thing is super long, and you can put a lot of torque to that before it'll break. But the thing is, I've seen these spread out and break on the end right here. I had to warranty one for a brother of mine one time, and it split right out, and the whole end of it came off. And the sad thing is that stupid company that, you know, it's supposed to be a lifetime warranty, they didn't want to warranty it, which is not cool. So just be aware of that. But I would say 1/2-inch breakover bar, fine. This 3/8-inch breakover bar, I haven't used that in years. You really don't need one. But the big 1/2-inch, I would say definitely go for, just to be sure that you can take stuff that's really tight loose. And then, you know, if something's that tight where you need the breakover bar and you're getting a big old cheater bar slipped over the end of it and everything to make it longer, be sure there's a couple of friends around, you know, just in case something goes wrong. You know, maybe somebody there with, you know, 911 on speed dial on their phone, you know. Always be sure you're very safe. I have to reiterate that over and over again. And finally, I'm going to go into ratchets that I have kind of broken. Cover up the logo here, because this is a good, reputable company, in my opinion. These ratchets are so small inside, and I don't know exactly what's in them. I've never took one apart, but they're basically, kind of looks like they have to be sealed together from the factory. But this is a ratcheting end wrench, and these are great. But these ones, don't use these on a tight fastener. I have a few of these that, yet again, don't be like me. I abuse my ratchets. I have a few of these I've abused to the point that they don't want to ratchet over anymore. So these are fantastic. These are great when you're in a tight space. But just try to use one of your solid end wrenches before you use one of these. And these are a great investment. I used to think these were stupid, and then I finally bought one on sale, and then I realized that my life had been changed, and so then I bought a whole set of them on sale. And it's funny when I say that, my life had been changed. There's another YouTube channel that said, buy a set of these, it'll change your life. And they're right. But be careful with them, because your life can be unchanged really fast. So that was this episode of Great Outdoors Garage. I really need you to like, comment, and subscribe. We're gaining some momentum here. And we've got our signature cut down sockets. And I'm curious how many people are starting to cut their sockets like I am. And so that's this video. But like, comment, and subscribe. And remember, we're Great Outdoors Garage. And there are some other good YouTube channels out there, by the way.